as you know, I'm in the UK because we're under very strict lockdown here. So it's nice that we can meet, and thanks to Mr. Balaji for organizing this. So he's hosting this from the IIT Madras campus. And so we could all join the meeting if I hope the connectivity works. How are all of you? We've also got a YouTube link, but I'm not sure of technology, so I'll stay with this. I think you've been informed of the YouTube link as well.
Yes, we are live now. Others, please you can ask your queries in the chat, or you can straight away discuss with the professor.
Of course. You could write your questions or just ask your questions. It may be better if 3 or 4 of you ask questions, and then I can answer questions in groups at a time so as to cover the topic as widely as possible. But it's all yours. Please ask and I'll try and answer. Yeah, tell me, Aditi. Okay, if I hope we've still got connectivity. I can see myself on the screen. And good afternoon or good evening to everyone. Can you hear me? Can all of you hear me? Okay, good. That's very good. Good, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Aditya. Right. Now, I haven't set an agenda for this because it's a tutorial. It's an open-ended discussion. You're welcome to ask questions about how we approach the course. We're welcome to ask about the content. So whatever concerns you have, don't hesitate to raise them. Perhaps I can ask you, have you found the advice I sent and posted as an announcement, and I sent it in the email, on the general approach? Have you found that helpful? Good, that's good to know. One of the things in this kind of subject is that we need to learn craft as well as content. And the craft of studying the humanities involves different kinds of things. We need to learn how to read and focus on our reading, focus on the arguments, focus on the evidence. Now, the evidence isn't just numbers or facts. It's often passages in the text or something that a very authoritative figure has said or done. So we need to back what we say with evidence. And I'm glad you found this helpful. We'll do something like this again when I set the practice essay, which is it's a graded exercise, 10%, as you probably know, and it's a practice essay, and it's intended to show you how to structure essays in this kind of subject. one of the things about learning the craft is that it makes the content easier to handle. And in the humanities, the content is always going to be challenging, difficult. I would add interesting and fascinating. But there we are. It's never easy in the humanities. And I'm sure in the sciences, exploring new work, learning new techniques is similar. But in the humanities, we're always going to be challenged, faced with new ideas and new approaches. And that takes time to get used to, particularly as it involves reflecting on our ways of life, on our societies, on our traditions, on our arts and politics and everything. And that is the case, that's been the case throughout the humanities since human beings started talking, I think. But please, this is your session, ask your questions. And don't be afraid to ask. Good morning, or good afternoon, rather. Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon, Professor. It's a delight to have you on this platform, and thank you very much for this level playing platform for students like us. Firstly, I would like to ask you that I'm not able to maintain my integrity towards the assignment. I'm going through the test transcripts and I'm trying to, just look for the answers. I mean, I'm not the learning experience. I think I'm compromising the integrity. So, how should I go about it?
Sure. Very good question. Perhaps you could tell me a little bit more. It must feel very uncomfortable if you think you're compromising your integrity. Tell me what can you explain that a bit, please?
Let's just say that there's a lapse of lectures, like I'm not able to balance my college with this lectures. So what happens is when I tend to uh, match up with the deadlines, then I'm not able to like I hope that I'm lucid with this. But having said that, if I go to the test transcript and I try to see the answers, I must admit that I do find them, but I feel I have compromised my integrity. I think that's damaging.
I'm sorry, I still don't fully understand. How do you mean compromised your integrity?
Professor, I'm sort of cheating through the assignments. I think I'm not able to fully grasp what it's expected out of the assignments. Uh, like some questions are very easy, and some questions are very tricky. For students like us, who have not had a proper college exposure, I think if I don't do this, I don't think I'm going to get to the exams, the main exams.
Well, please don't be worried. That's my first reply. Please don't be worried. This is a subject that it takes time to get used to, right? Do you remember when in the general instructions that I sent, the first time I met my tutor, we have a pastoral tutor system where you're allocated to a member of staff in the UK. He later became my tutor, but he was a professor of philosophy, and he interviewed me for a place to read philosophy. That's my background, philosophy and political philosophy. And I've worked in British public services as well, and my PhD came from my working experience. But the first thing he said to me was, nobody understands the work of philosophy the first time they read it. He was absolutely right. And he included everyone who reads serious work in the humanities. It takes time to get used to it. Don't try and rush at it. And please don't panic if you find it difficult the first time. Now, this happens to all of us, absolutely everyone at every stage. That's why in the humanities, we are all, in a very fundamental sense, equal. We are faced with ideas in the language that we all speak, human language. So it will take time to get used to it. The assignments are all multiple choice. So usually one phrase or one word is missing. And you will find it helpful to listen to each lecture, do it in short spells, as I've advised, 20 or 25 minutes. So once you've listened to it once, then you can read the transcripts, come back to the recorded lecture if you like, or listen to the lecture twice and then read the transcripts. And then when you do the multiple choice questions, don't rush at the answers. Take your time. I don't know if you're, when you open the MCQ, the weekly assignment, is there a time limit on answering it?
Yes, of course. There is a week or so which is given to us.
Oh, 1 week. Yes, of course. But when you're actually looking at it, there's no time limit. It's not like being in an exam. You know, you get 1 hour or 2 hours.
Absolutely not. No.
Don't worry if you don't see the answers straight away. If you're able to do a split screen, try and keep the transcript with you as one half of the screen. I'm not sure how to do that myself, but an easy way, I hope it'll make this will make it easier. Read the question. If it says, for example, according to liberalism, you know, the individual is only part of the family, or something like that. I'm just inventing this. Answer A, the individual is only part of the family. Answer B, the individual is a self-substantive being. Answer C, the individual makes no sense outside the nation. Something like that. Read the question to yourself, read it aloud, and then read the answers aloud and think which one gets closest to the correct answer. Don't worry about getting it right or wrong. I think in many ways the question will also lead you to the answer. Please don't worry if you don't.
I must say that it's pretty intimidating. I must say that, but thank you very much for it. I think it's very assuring, and I look into it.
I hope that helps. Hope that helps. And with the multiple choice questions, you can do them as often as you like. You can try them as often as you like. I think that's the instruction when you open up each MCQ each week. It says you can try these as often as you like. I did a professional training course about 2 or 3 years ago, and I had to do it online. And they said you can hand in certain assignments, you can do any number of times. Luckily, I didn't need to, luckily, but some of them were quite challenging, and they were multiple choice type and it had a range of questions. But I was very glad that, you know, second and third options were allowed. So don't worry if you get it wrong. Listen to the lecture first, 20 minutes at a time, stop, come back to it, listen to it all, read the transcript, right? And if you can, then read the transcript twice. Again, only in short spells, read a couple of pages, take short notes if you like. And don't hesitate to try the MCQs again. If you don't get them right the first time, have another go. For example, when they go up, I check them every week to make sure the codings are correct from our side. And sometimes I look at that, look at the question, I think, oh, crikey, do I know the answer to that? I set the question, right? Because I set them to make us think. And I think, oh, yeah, now I meant to do that. I've confused myself. And it is right that I've confused myself, because it means we have to think about the answer. So don't hesitate to put an answer down. Don't hesitate to try it again. And please don't feel under mental pressure. This subject takes time to get used to. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Definitely, it did. For instance, like if you see there's a who wrote the Leviathan, I mean the book. So it's
Yes.
easy to answer. But if there's a quote, let's say there's a quote, there's a very long quote, and who wrote who's the author of it? So it's quite intimidating. I'm
understand, but you will find the answers in the text or the lectures or the recorded lectures. The answers are there. Yes, these are not outside the material you already have. The answers are all in there. If you have the textbook, if you can get hold of it, you'll find many of the same things there. The lectures go a little bit beyond with the examples and so on, but otherwise the content is very nearly identical. Yeah. So the answers are all in there. Don't hesitate to try them again and again if you like. Yeah. And don't panic. Please don't worry. Yeah. Let the subject to you. Okay. Hope that helps. And I hope that helps everyone else as well. Right. So, yes. Some of you are science students, and I'll try and answer your question. Some of you have asked about the end of term exam. Okay, I think the format has been explained to you in the announcements or in the course introduction, but I'll answer both the questions. I'll take the exam format one first. Now, the exam content will be derived from the lectures and the transcripts If you have the textbook, that will also help you. That is the set book, right? But you won't need to go outside those materials. You will find it helpful, as I said in the general advice, to keep an eye on the quality newspapers and some of the center page type analyses, that kind of thing, or the top news magazines. I mean, Outlook, Frontline. EPW, of course, is a top class academic journal, and so on. And we've used some of the EPW for the seminars, the worked examples, right? Those are in the video lectures. The format of the exam is straightforward. These are NPTEL rules. Each question paper, I think, is 3 hours. And the first half is 50 multiple choice questions. All of them are based strictly on the material that we have covered in class or shall have covered. So you won't need to go outside that, right? Please don't leave any answers blank. There's a very good reason for that. Even if you get the wrong answer, you've got a 25% chance of getting it right. If you leave it blank, you've got no chance of getting any marks. But think about the question, that'll probably guide you to the answer, or it may well do so. That's part one, 50 questions. Part two is 2 essays on each exam paper. So each exam paper is 50 MCQs, 2 essay questions. Shortish essays, about 1,000, 1,200 words each. Don't go into too much detail. And each of the questions combines 2 topics from the course. Maybe something like, I don't know, can there be conservative fascism, or can there be conservative environmentalism, or is Marxist thinking reconcilable with Republican citizenship, and so on. They'll combine 2 topics. Don't feel you have to learn everything in detail. It's far better to learn the main point, the main ideas of the different ideologies, and then you'll see the connections and the differences, and you can use examples in support. Yeah. We will have a practice essay, and that will show you the kind of structure that we need. Yeah. So that'll give you an idea. With the MCQs, I think you can use previous year's, last year's examples for practice as well with the weekly assignments, and they'll help you with the MCQs in the exam. So I hope that helps. Don't hesitate to ask again if you're not clear of the exam structure. 50 MCQs in each paper, 2 essays in each paper, and we will have an essay practice, grading a practice exercise, which will be graded for 10% in, I think, week 8 or 9. I'm still thinking about what question to set for that. Okay, some of you are science students. Very nice to see you. I moved from the sciences to philosophy. I went to university to read engineering, and I enjoyed the labs and the workshops. I was better at the physics than at the maths, but I was not comfortable with the overall atmosphere. So I moved to philosophy, and I'd already been reading some philosophy and other theoretical work in the humanities. And I was much more at home there. But even today, when people explain the physics or mechanics of something, I'm always interested to learn about it. The approach is very different. In the sciences, we're accustomed to using proofs and demonstrations, and then maybe carrying out experiments in the labs just to test out a theory, right? We may get an equation or a chemical reaction, and then test it in the lab, or watch a demonstration to test it. But in the humanities, we have to get used to arguments. Now, these are perfectly rational arguments. Not anything will count. And they are supported by examples and evidence. And the evidence can be of many different kinds. It could be physical evidence. It could be facts and figures. But very often it's also further material from the text. Or, yes, is this supported by what so-and-so says, who may be an authority in the field? Or we may look at, I think I mentioned Supreme Court judgments. We may look at those and say, well, yes, which ideology is expressed here? Is it republicanism or is it liberalism? And we may have disagreements, but we have to give reasons for our disagreements to support our position. It takes time to get used to it. It took me also a little time to get used to writing essays in the humanities. A few weeks, but we had to write essays every week when I was a first-year student. And you get used to focusing on the text. Summarize the text accurately. That is also a matter of intellectual integrity. It is easy to give a wrong description or an inaccurate description of somebody's argument and then criticize the argument. So we have to give an accurate account of the main set text or the main set of arguments we're addressing, and then see what the problems are and what responses might be made to the problems. Yeah, I hope that helps. I hope that answers your question. Right, one or two of you have put up some more questions since then. I'll answer these straight away and then we'll have a look. Okay, one of you, Anand, you're asking, yes, you've asked these in the group. You remember my answer? And justifiable limitations to freedoms and rights, yes. And the third question, what's the difference between classical and neoliberalism? Well, okay. First of all, please don't be upset. Do you remember my reply? These are good questions to ask. There's nothing wrong with the questions. You will find that, yep, do you remember the reply that I made at the time? Don't be upset. These are good questions, but you will find that they are actually addressed in the lectures and in the transcripts, right? Okay, but I'll give you a broad outline straight away. Question one, what is negative freedom and positive freedom? Well, and what kinds of rights? Do you remember the explanation? Okay, do you remember the name of the philosopher who is associated with the idea of negative and positive freedom? Have you gone back to the text to read it in the light of my question? Of my response? My response was, yes, these are addressed in the text. I'll give you a very brief reply here, very brief, but please go back and read it. You will find it's addressed. Okay, Isaiah Berlin, an Oxford philosopher, suggested the difference between, argued that there was a difference between negative freedom and positive freedom. Negative freedom is freedom from restrictions or unjustifiable restrictions and constraints, right? He says we have a right to that as well. You know, police officers can't simply walk into your room and beat you up or into your house, right? We have laws to protect freedoms, but there's the laws which say the state or other people cannot do X, Y, and Z. Their freedom is restricted so that we have freedom from interference which cannot be justified. Freedom from arbitrary interference, arbitrary discrimination, caste, race, faith, you name it. So those are negative freedoms, freedom from. Positive freedom is freedom to do something. For example, most democracies in the world today give us freedom of choice of faith. We are free to choose our faith or have no faith at all. The Indian Constitution does that. Very clear about it. Secondly, we are free to associate with whoever we like. Our friends, our parents, you know, our community may dislike it, but they don't get the option. That is freedom to do things, and nobody has any right to interfere in that freedom. I think the Shafi and Jahan judgment may be an example of that. Have a look at it. I've mentioned it in the worked examples, where the Supreme Court of India concluded that it's a case where the court concluded that if somebody was of sound mind, they were free to marry anyone they liked. They were free to change their faith, whatever they liked. They didn't have to do anything they didn't have to do what other people thought in that regard. And that confirms the rights of the individual as stated in the Constitution. So it's an example of what those rights can mean. So that would be positive freedom, the freedom to do something. It's within the law. If you're of sound mind, you're free to do that. Yep, in that particular case, right? And in that kind of case. Okay, limitations or justifiable limitations, there is no easy answer. These have to be argued for. For example, in the United Kingdom, about 20 years ago, noisy neighbors were made the subject of new legislation. The Labour government had been elected the previous year, 1997. And by 1998, they recognized a public policy issue. And they said, right, you can bring the state can bring criminal actions against noisy or nuisance neighbors, right? Now, the point is that these restrictions have to be argued for. They have to be justified in the law, using previous law, using general principles of democracy. So there are no easy answers about who decides. Usually a legislative body quite often a Supreme Court. These can be surprising decisions. For example, in the United States, there's a case called Garcia, or in English, Garcia, in the city of San Antonio, which I visited. Very lovely city. It's actually now under a sort of severe, it's in this bout of freezing weather, very nasty weather they've had in Texas. But as you know, in the United States, the Second Amendment to the Constitution gives what right? The freedom to bear and use arms in self-defense. In practice, this means anyone can carry a gun, including semi-automatic rifles, as you may have seen in the riots in the Capitol, that is the Central Parliament of the United States, the other day. And somebody brought, I think the school board, that is the municipal school authority in San Antonio, Texas, brought in a rule saying nobody should carry a gun within, I can't remember if it's 100 feet or 100 meters or within a certain area of every school in the city. And of course, in the United States, the Second Amendment is almost a kind of sacred religious principle. People brought an action against the city authorities, and they won under the Second Amendment. So the Supreme Court actually ruled that the restriction by the city council, the city corporation, on carrying handguns, or I think they specified which types of guns, I can't remember, within a certain area of the school was unjustifiable. You'll be familiar with this. You've perhaps walked past education establishments, colleges and university campuses in India. You may have seen on the main gate, no smoking within 100 meters or whatever it is of the main gate. Many of the campuses are non-smoking. So the question there is, has the university got the authority to make such a ruling under the bylaws as they stand? Could it be that the town or city corporation made the ruling? Well, that is perfectly. But there's no easy answer. These limitations have to be argued for and justified under existing principles of ethics, which they may stretch, and under existing legislative powers. Yeah. So particular examples are the only way to address that one. I hope that helps you. Classical liberalism and neoliberalism. Well, I would suggest, I'm not dismissing your question. It is a good question. It is covered in the lectures, and it's covered in the transcripts, and it's covered in the book. So please read on. Yeah. You've been through the lecture again. Okay. Think what I've said about it. Do you remember what I said about classical liberalism and neoliberalism? Okay. Well, all I say is have a look at the text again, but keep one point in mind. Could it be that there is no difference? Could it be that neoliberalism is an attempt to revive classical liberalism? Yeah? Think about that and have another read. Yeah? Okay, think about that. You will find maybe no one answer in there, but think about it with my point in mind, and I hope that'll help you. If it doesn't help, then send an email, please. The reason I say this is that this is a very good example of how we don't often understand things the first time we read them. In the humanities, we very rarely do. Have another look. And it's a good question. Yes, and it could arise, for example, if a neoliberal said, hey, I want to revive classical liberalism, and one people might say, well, yeah, you try to do that today, fine. The ideas may be very similar, but our conditions are very different today. They may be right or wrong, but they need to give evidence for their argument. And quite a lot of neoliberals may well have said that they are reviving the principles of classical liberalism. So some will, some won't. We need to how should I put it, to draw a mental map of this area, classical liberalism versus neoliberalism. And we may not reach a definite conclusion, but we'll have a richer sense of the map of the neighborhood of the area. Does that make sense? Yeah, try that and see. If you still get stuck, send an email, please, Arvind. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to raise? Don't hesitate.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I am Arvind Kumar from Bangalore, Karnataka.
Yeah.
Sir,
Mhm.
it was a very good, I have heard your lectures. It was very nice, sir, and I can understand it very well. I had a question, sir. If at all I could not turn on the exam day, whether we get any second chance?
Very good question. We fully understand, everyone involved with NPTEL fully understands the issues we all face are traveling to exam centers or connectivity problems. I would advise you to approach the support team. Have you got an email for them, support@nptel or something like that? Have you
Yes,
contacted
sir.
them before? Because they have a support team with advice on things like this. Check with them, please, as soon as possible, so that they have the maximum time to advise you and you have the maximum time to see what is the best thing to do. If there is a problem with connectivity on the day, inform them immediately, please. Yeah, either
Okay,
by
sir.
phone or whatever. It's an issue for all of us. Last semester, when I was taking my usual course for that semester, all the students were all over India, and I was sitting here in the UK. Sometimes we had awful connectivity problems. So NPTEL are familiar with this issue, and the support team will be able to advise you. Yep, I hope
Thank you,
that
sir.
helps. Try
Yes,
that
sir.
and see. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. One of you has asked a question, Sumedha. You've asked a question about writing essays. Now, never easy. It just never is. It helps to have a structure, and when we do the practice assignment, I will advise on a structure. I strongly recommend that you follow that. And the reason is it makes the topic easier to learn. It also gives us practice summarizing an argument even reasonably accurately. If we can do that, we'll see what the problems are in the argument, right? And we'll be able to use the supporting literature to evaluate the argument. Okay? It's never easy. I have never found it easy to write essays. I'll frankly admit it, I don't like writing. I must have written millions of words. I've written 7 books, one co-edited with a colleague of mine, Dr. Padmanabhan at IIT Madras, on Indian democracy. That's out. I'm not saying you've got to go off and read it, but I don't find it easy to write. And one of the best pieces of advice I was given many years ago by someone who became a friend, who was an advisor to students when I was an undergraduate. And she said, work short spells, work for an hour at a time and stop. Otherwise, I could see why she said it. Otherwise you lose concentration. And don't stop to polish up. When you write the draft, or when we see published things, very often that's a second or third draft. If it's academic material, there may have been more drafts. That doesn't mean we rewrite them completely 5 times or whatever. It does mean that we write a draft that's often very rough. We then polish it up. Or when we send a paper off for publication, it'll come back with referees' comments. I sometimes get asked to referee things. Everything I've published has been refereed, almost everything. And you find the referee has got good and important things to say about things that we didn't see or points that need polishing up. Do what they say. But the draft is the hard work. When you're writing the draft, don't stop to polish up, right? We'll do this when we do the practice essay. Are you doing essays for other NPTEL courses? If you are, try it like this. When you pick up a book in a bookshop, we look at the back cover to see what the pre-publication reviews are, something about the author. We might look at the contents page, and that gives us an idea of the structure of the book. I'm actually just doing that for a book I'm reviewing for the paper Business Line. And it's a book which takes Marx's work very interestingly much further and says the whole global economy has shifted from production to making money out of controlling access. Facebook is a classic example, right? But first thing I did was I read some some reviews of the book, which came out in November, I think. I thought, well, that looks good. I'll offer the review. And then when I got the book, I looked at the contents page. That is how the argument is structured. So do this with an academic paper. Look at the subheadings first. They'll give you an idea of the shape of the argument, right? And Just read it. Read it quickly as you would if you're leafing through a book in a bookshop. 2 or 3 minutes, you'll get an idea what it says. Then you can read it more slowly. And generally, essays in the humanities require that we address a main text, or that if we are left to do some research on a particular topic, we will find a main text, or people will advise us on a main text. I always set a main text because that's the easiest thing to do. And some of the ones I had to read in philosophy as a student were very, very bulky indeed and very tough indeed, but that's what we wanted. That's how you do it. Read the main text. Okay, summarize it. Short notes, don't stop to polish up. Get the short notes down. Once you've done that, read them again, and you'll have a much better sense of the structure of the main text. If you do that, you'll already have an idea what the problems are. You say, what about this one? For example, if we're reading about liberalism, one of your classmates has quite correctly said, well, yeah, I read this, but what's the difference between classical and classical liberalism and neoliberalism? Very good question. Yes, I've addressed it in the text. So when you read the text with your question in mind, you'll learn the text better and you learn the issues better. That's exactly what will happen. Summarize the main text. You'll be aware what the problems are. You'll have certain questions. You'll almost certainly find that I'll set supporting literature that will help you address those problems, right? So writing essays, it's never easy. I never find it easy. And I find it quite, I start by working short spells. Quite often I'll put something off and I think suddenly, well, come on, get down to it. Give it 1 hour, make a start, come back to it a bit later, do another hour. Before you know it, you're done. But it takes practice. It's never easy to do. And that's because if we're addressing serious issues, they are complex, they are difficult, and they do require us to think. In the humanities, they can be very unsettling, particularly if they make us think about, I don't know, our society, our family background, our faith, and so on. Many of the greatest writings in the humanities are written in profound doubt and uncertainty, but they also illuminate the doubt and uncertainty and illuminate new ways of thinking. So it takes time and practice, never easy. Yeah, never easy. Okay, remembering everything you read, any suggestions from yourselves, please? Let me give you an example. When you move to a new neighborhood, even within your town or city or your village, you don't know anything about the area. How do you find out? There are several ways. One way is to look at a map. Oh yes, there's a lake there, there's a zoo there, there's a school there, or there are fields here, or there is a forest here, right? Or if you're in South India, coconut groves there, or whatever it happens to be, yeah? Or prawn farms, or whatever it happens to be. But that's one way. Look at a map and you get a rough idea. You don't actually know what it looks like, whether it's uphill or downhill, or whether it's a long open road in the sun or whatever. But you look at a map, you get an idea where things are in relation to each other. That's one way. Another way, start walking around. Okay, we don't know the neighborhood, but we take a short walk, turn left, go down the hill to the shops, right? Oh yes, maybe there's a dhaba there and we have a cup of tea or something and go home, or a tea stall, right? And then we think, oh yes, there's a side road from there, wonder what's down there. But we can go down the side road because we know how to get to the point where the side road starts. So we explore, exactly, we got it right. We explore, we get to know the area. There's no such thing as perfect knowledge. Start exploring, right? And that's how we get to know texts, areas, topics in the humanities. It's also true in the sciences, except that in most of the sciences, we need to learn certain techniques. If we are to do what is to count as sound exploration. In the humanities, there's no such thing. We just have to get to know the area by exploring it. Walk down a certain road, that's a dead end. Oh, right, that argument leads me into incoherence. We turn around and walk back, oh, don't go down that road. It's a bit like that. I hope that helps. Don't worry if you can't remember everything. You can't. It can't be done, right? What we do learn is the shape and pattern of arguments. You also learn what theories of human nature and human action, or even theories of knowledge, lie behind these arguments or which are expressed in them. And those are never complete, but we can learn the terrain, we can learn the landscape, or learn to chart the water. Don't sail there, there are shoals. Don't fall overboard there, the sea is full of crocodiles or sharks or whatever. Yeah? So, or don't sail there, you'll get headwinds or storms. We learn that as we go along, right? We get familiar with the area, with the terrain. Yeah, and we also get to relate systems of ideas to previous systems of ideas because they often develop from each other. I hope that helps. Okay, structuring essays in the humanities. Do you remember what I said a minute ago? Okay, I'll say it again. Very often there's one main text or one main topic. And quite often there are significant texts which address that topic. In my case, I set the main text. I set all the texts for you to cover so that you don't wander around the net looking for things which may be too bulky or not relevant, and so on. Summarize the main set text first, or address the main set issue first by reading the main text around it, right? It's because many of the great figures have written about these things and have written giant things about them that really make us think, even if the arguments they put are wrong, and even if they later abandon those arguments. We need to learn why the problems exist in those arguments and what the problems are. Main arguments first, and then you'll see the responses to those arguments written by other great scholars and even by other students. Talking about it among yourselves is a great way to learn this subject. So yes, the humanities are about arguments. There are areas of the humanities where what is to count as an argument is itself a philosophic question. Don't worry about that just yet. You don't need to think about that too much. But set out the main arguments, you'll see where the problems are, and then you'll find the documents responding to them, or you'll find the ideas coming up in your head. Many of you have done that already. What's the difference between classical and neoliberalism? What's the difference between positive and negative rights? Who justifies those? Who decides those? Those are the typical kinds of questions we ask in the humanities. And when we read about the humanities, we'll see how they've been addressed, how those questions have been addressed. There may be no final answer either, right? When I mark 50 essays from a class, everybody does cover the same material, but they say good things and sound things about the material, which is partly what they need to learn, but every essay is different. Somewhat different in different ways, different approaches, perhaps a different sequence, but I generally expect that they will cover the main text reasonably accurately and identify the main advantages and the main problems. Yeah? How does that help? I hope that helps. Let me know. Okay. Any other questions at the moment? I've got one more on economics and politics to cover here. Yes, very good questions about economics and politics. Well, if you read, as in when you come to this, if you do come to this, you'll find that many of the great economists were philosophers first and foremost. It goes for Adam Smith, it goes for Karl Marx, it goes for John Stuart Mill. It's only very recently, perhaps from the mid to late 19th century, that there's been any clear and I think untenable distinction between politics and economics. Technical economics is very mathematical, as you probably know, and it is coming under severe criticism even from several Nobel Prize winners in technical economics. Okay, I'll offer you a little reading here. Maybe 3 years ago, I have a little bit of background. I came back to the UK for Christmas at the end of the semester at IIT Madras, and it's usually about 3 or 4 weeks. And I walked into our local bookshop. We have a wonderful cooperative bookshop here called October Books. I just walked in for Christmas, getting a few Christmas cards, maybe looking to see what they had. They also sell foods and so on. And they now run a food bank for poorer people in the UK. They help to run a food bank. So we all make donations to them. So I walked in, and one of the senior staff who helps around the place, mainly volunteers, some of them are paid staff, walked over, just said, "Hello, nice to see you back," and so on. And without a word, she put a book in my hand. It's called Great Economic Thinkers, edited by Jonathan Conlin, Professor Jonathan Conlin at Southampton University, where I used to work, where I studied. And I opened one page. I thought, that's enough, I'll buy it. I did. And I offered a review to Business Line, whom I knew slightly. I was senior deputy editor on The Hindu for several years. And Business Line said, yep, we'll have it. So I wrote the review, and I absolutely loved reading the book. If you're welcome to read the review, put my name and Conlin or Great Economic Thinkers. The book is, by the way, available, I think, in paperback in India. It really is top class. And it shows how the major thinkers in economics are actually philosophers. And they're addressing significant philosophic issues in politics, in philosophy, and in economics. So there's no, I would say read the ideas. Yes, you'll find most political science involves issues in economics and applied economics. For example, Maynard Keynes, the British economist, was himself a tremendous mind. And he once said, he actually devised a whole way of looking at political economy, which has been called Keynesianism. The state is the major guarantor of the economy. By the way, even in neoliberal times, that has never changed. The state has redirected its funding. And he once said he only did economics because everyone else did it so badly. But he had a very big ego, and with a mind like his, you could understand it. He said, economics doesn't matter. What matters is music and religion and art and philosophy. And very often, the great thinkers have been focused on those, but economics has been part of what they think about those major issues. So have a look at the review. Put in my name, Sivaramakrishnan, and Conlin, C-O-N-L-I-N. You'll find the review. And you'll find that most public policy issues, if you read the background documents, look at things like funding, potential hazards and snags. For example, I know everybody likes to hate the Planning Commission, which has now been abolished. But many of the Planning Commission documents are absolutely top class. Okay, what happens to them as they go through the political legislative process is often, very peculiar. What we get at the end is, doesn't look anything like the original planning intentions. I'll give you some examples. You're familiar, I think, does the name Mandal mean anything to you? Mandal Report? What policy do you associate with the Mandal Report? Reservations. Yep, familiar with the idea in Indian public policy? Yes, well done. Now, the Mandal Report, I think, was written in the late 1970s and submitted to the Planning Commission, if I'm not mistaken. It recommended that people from disadvantaged classes should not qualify for reservations if they were already successful in life. It recommended a 10-year limit on reservations. It recommended, I think, some kind of income limit on reservations. The report itself was very intelligent, very thoughtful, and very alert to ground conditions all over India. I'll be blunt about this. When the politicians got hold of it, they took it to pieces and put it back in a form which is almost unrecognizable. And that form has caused other issues, including major problems of which you will be aware. Yeah? Now, I should also point out, IIT Madras is a central government institution. We're a public service institution and a public sector institution. Reservations are the law, and we follow them. We absolutely follow them. That's the requirement, we do it. My evaluation excuse me, is not simply my own. Other people have said this about the Mandal Report, that it was actually very sensible and very intelligent, right? With a clear eye to ground conditions. Okay, I know the media don't often talk about these things, right? But if you get to know the area, supposing you're doing a postgraduate project on it or something, you'll often find this. this also holds with things like the minimum support price for grain. That's been, again, many of the background analyses have been absolutely excellent. But policies will not always end up looking like the recommendations made in the background analyses and reports. Civil servants will tell you that, IAS and IFS officers and the others will tell you that. By the way, my father was in the IFS and often discussed his work with me for many, many years, from the time I was, I don't know, 12 or 13 even. And I really valued that. Nothing confidential, nothing about staff, but background and the ways things were going in politics and so on. He would always often discuss those with me. So the question then is, don't just blame the Mundell Commission. Read that report, see what happened to the recommendations. And that's true of an awful lot of public policy. Very often public policy has to be altered for economic reasons, and quite often, a government will, I can remember reading the memoirs of a former cabinet secretary, and he said that he was chief secretary to one of the states, and he said the governor of that state, I think they were put under president's rule for a time, the governor would make it clear to the civil servants what he could and couldn't do. And he would explain, say sometimes, sorry, that's party political, I can't touch that. Or he'd say, yes, I can do that, or I'd have to reconcile it, but let's see what we could do. And those are factors that the media don't conceal, but they don't often have access to those. So it's a matter of reading the background documentation, reading the analyses. EPW, Frontline, Outlook, India's heavyweight press does carry these analyses, often by people who are involved. Okay, question from Harshal. I'll take this. I'll keep an eye on the clock, by the way. Okay, revised guidelines for holding. Yes, very good point. Yes, very good point. This is present day policy making, absolutely right. Correlate this with our course. Okay. Who are expressing the guidelines? Which bodies expressing guidelines for online and virtual conferences and seminars and training? Check which body is involved.
So I guess Ministry of Education was there, right?
What's it called now? It's called the Ministry of
What it changed name?
Human Resource Development, HRD.
Okay.
Right. It was the Ministry of Education. It's been the HRD ministry for, I think, 15 or 20 years. Maybe that long, but it's certainly been called that for a long time. I think 15 years, maybe more. Okay, secondly, it's a ministry. So where would you locate it in the government of India? Is it a state ministry?
It's a central ministry.
Central government ministry. Okay, good. Right. And the head of the HRD ministry is a member of what?
He is a cabinet member of parliament.
Absolutely. Absolutely. An MP and a cabinet member. What's the actual name for the cabinet in India?
Lok Sabha?
No, that Lok Sabha is what?
No, yeah, it's like just the House of Representatives.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yes. It's one part of the Representative Assembly. Okay. But the cabinet, what's the actual name for the cabinet in India?
No, I don't know.
The Council of Ministers.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Now, the thing about this article is, first of all, have a look at the source, who's written it, and they may well be very authoritative in the field. It may be a senior professor or a senior professor in a top administrative position like UGC or somewhere. Secondly, what is actually proposed? What is proposed? Check the specification of what is proposed. Is it the case that central government plan to take over the approval of international conferences and seminars? Are they planning to do that?
Yeah, it was like targeted towards government, but it was like a office memorandum on January 15th. It was mentioned, it was some office memorandum on January 15th, and it was about some revised guidelines.
Revised guidelines, indeed, indeed. Guidelines. So is that law?
No, it's not law at all. It's not.
And okay, and which institutions will be covered by this? Will it be only state or central government funded institutions? Or will it?
No, it will be only universities, central government, and which are like government colleges, not private colleges.
Okay, good. Yeah. So people like Amity University will not be affected. Am I right?
So come again?
Amity University, will they be affected?
No, they won't be affected, but it said like they are, they will be followed after that, something like that.
Oh,
Ultimately.
all right. It could be that fresh regulations are being drafted. Okay. Well done. Read the article, read it closely. Can anyone think of a previous example of this from about a year or two ago? There was an example. And it was, I think, January 18 or 19. I really can't remember. 18, I think. It said, or around the early part of 2018, and central government were proposing that government-funded colleges, I think at state and central level, would not be allowed to publish research findings or to criticize government policy. And immediately, of course, the campus unions made the perfectly clear point that this was a violation of what?
Freedom of speech.
Okay, something else, something perhaps even stronger than that. The Constitution of the Republic of India.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, constitutional guarantee. If I'm not mistaken, the Constitution guarantees freedom of teaching and research.
Yeah, scientific research.
Yeah, well, any research. And remember, if I'm a government and I put billions into a policy and it goes wrong, don't you think I might want to know why it's gone wrong?
Yeah,
So
yeah, we should be able to investigate.
investigate. Yeah. Now I say, look, I'm not a social scientist. You're the social scientist. Go out there and tell me why this education policy has failed. Right? It's interesting you should raise this kind of example. About a year ago, I wrote a review of a book by my late colleague Dilip Veeraraghavan on Rajagopalachari's, what was it called? Modified Scheme of Elementary Education for the Old Madras State, 1950 or 52 or 53. And Veeraraghavan's MPhil was published, it was handed in at the University of Madras in 1982. He died young to our great regret, a very loved and respected colleague, very much loved and respected colleague. It's a brilliant MPhil, stunningly good. It's like a political thriller. But he goes into the detail, and people openly protested about this proposed scheme of education reform. It was abandoned. Rajaji abandoned it. But they could speak freely and point out what was wrong with the policy, with the plan. Okay, that's one issue. But the other is check the legislation under which this proposal is made, because no central government wants to lose a case in the Supreme Court. No government does. So you raised, this is a very serious issue. You're right. Do you think it might have international implications?
Yes, sir. Like, so I'm from IIT Madras, and
Yeah.
we have many scholars from Germany and European countries, right?
Yeah.
Our IIT Madras has a tie-up with many universities, so
Of course, yeah.
So that will be affected as because directly affects the transfer of knowledge from one
Transfer of
group
knowledge, absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah. Which department are you in at IIT Madras?
So I'm from computer science.
Computer science, right? Yes. Some of you have taken my ideologies option as lectures in on campus. It's an option on campus. But the point here is, supposing I'm a foreign researcher, and great, my colleague XYOZ in India is doing such and such. Let's have an international conference online. And then we find the central government of India is saying, well, we're not to have this meeting, not to discuss research findings or proposed research projects. It doesn't matter in which area. This, for example, is happening already in pharmaceuticals. In the Western world, a lot of pharmaceutical research is funded by the big corporations. And some of them have started putting limitations on what can be published, particularly with harmful effects of medicines. Now, time's going by, but this is an issue that arises very often in many parts of the world. With private bodies, yes, there is an issue, but there again, in the United States, First Amendment protections may mean you can publish anyway, right, in the Constitution. Similar issues may arise in India. Sorry. So keep an eye on this, well spotted. You may wish to share the item with classmates or with myself. I mean, please do so. And then we'll need to look at the reliability of the arguments, the accuracy of them, the issues they raise, and whether the government's policy as intended, apparently intended, is constitutionally tenable or not. Yeah? And that for us, that's what we need to do.
Yeah, yes, sir. Correct.
Okay, I hope that helps. Time's going by. Would you like another tutorial in about 2 or 3 weeks' time?
Yeah, yes, sir. Definitely.
Okay, I hope you found this helpful.
Yes, sir. Thank you from me.
Yeah, and if you're still confused, send a note through the mailing group, through the forum. Okay, well, time's going by. I think Mr. Balaji will close the session down very shortly. He's in his studio at NPTEL. Normally, I would be there.
Okay, sir. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Balaji.
Yes,
Rumba
sir.
Nandri.
Okay.
Varmatha Nandrikal.
Stop the live, sir. Okay.
Rumba Nandri.